One common misconception people have about homeopathy.
Homeopathy is slow. When it comes to acute conditions, if you're on the right drug, it is instantaneous unless the medicine selected is totally wrong.
Do you get time for your family?
Happiness comes in fulfilling the things that you set during the day. It's not about motivation, because time comes when motivation doesn't wake you up at 3. It's about discipline that will make you wake up at around 3 and put in the hard work.
What is something about this career that is heavily romanticized but is completely different?
Everything looks good on the outside, but the amount of hard work that goes beneath the surface of water is something that counts. When patients feel that they've been cared for, so maybe just sit and listen to their stories is something that helps patients in recovery also quite a lot.
How long would it take you to become financially stable?
With experience, with the results, with the confidence as you built up, as long as the patient benefits from it, patients are willing to pay you what you ask for.
Today we're joined by Dr. Dolan Martins, a homeopathic practitioner who actually grew up around homeopathy since his family has been involved in that field for years. So unlike others, he discovered this path at a very young age and has been surrounded by the idea of holistic learning since then. Today we'll talk about what homeopathy really is, how he ended up choosing that path, and how does the career really look like. Hello and welcome to the Becoming Project.
Hey Nina, thanks for having me over.
So we'll just get into it. I have a question for you. If you had to explain homeopathy to someone who's only ever experienced conventional medicine, how would you describe it and what makes it fundamentally different?
Basically, homeopathy is a therapeutic system of medicine that's based on an universal law of cure known as similia similibus curenta. And when I say it's a law, it means a law similar to what you have the law of gravity. It's different from a rule which are man-made, but a law is something that's universal. Okay, that's goes beyond everything, that will remain through wherever you go. So this is based on a law known as similia similibus curenta, meaning like cures like.
Yes. And how is it different from conventional medicine?
The basic thing is about the principle of homeopathy, which makes it very different from conventional medicine.
Okay.
So for example, there were different medicines that were used even previously, traditionally. For example, quinine, which is used in the cure of malaria, was been used for ages together, much before the practice of homeopathy started. So when we were going through the literature, when the father of homeopathy was going through the literature of quinine, he came across a very interesting line saying that quinine can cure malaria because it can produce symptoms which resemble malaria. Okay. So it was based on the principle of likes. Okay, so when he took quinine externally, just to experiment with it, he came across the poisoning of quinine, which resembled the same symptoms that you get when a patient suffers from malaria.
Okay.
Similar, for a simple day-to-day example would be something like, traditionally we know that onions are used in the treatment of cold. So you'll find your grandmother telling, if the child has got a cold, you maybe give them put in some paste of onion, things of that sort. In homeopathy, we have a medicine that's also prepared from an onion. But how does it act? Just like how when you cut onions, okay, it will lead to a watering in the eyes, watering of your nose. When you get similar kind of symptoms, only in those conditions, we will prescribe maybe a medicine that's prepared of onions, because it can produce. Similarly, like how it can produce a symptom, it can also cure the similar symptom.
Thank you. That was really cool. Homeopathy is often described as treating the person rather than the disease. What does that actually look like in a real consultation?
For example, for a simple example like fever, for example, if a patient comes down with an acute condition, maybe of just fever, we all know that there's a rise of temperature, which is something that's common. But along with the rise in temperature, each individual comes up with individual symptoms, okay, which tells you something about the constitution, something about the personality of a patient. For example, some may come out with joint pains. Some children would want the mother throughout the event that is falling sick, would like the mother to be close, to be patted. This you do not see with every kid. Some kids would be extremely irritable, extremely angry and crying, weeping. So all these are symptoms related to the individual. So when we are making a selection of the homeopathic remedy, we always take into consideration both the physicals as well as the mentals which come along with the physical symptoms. That's how we differentiate it from other systems of medicine where only fever would be the symptom that you select the medication on.
Nice. So when many people hear the word holistic, they don't fully understand it. In your practice, how does the mind, the emotion, and physical symptoms connect during the treatment?
Holistic means whole, okay? Each symptom is a reflection of the internal derangement of health. It could be showing you on different levels of the body. It could be on the mind, it could be at the level of your skin, or maybe on the liver, different organs. So when you treat holistically or homeopathically, you take into consideration all the symptoms that are mentally, emotionally, physically into consideration for selection of the remedy. And only when the remedy matches all the symptoms, that's when cure will take place. It is similar like a lock and key. You'll have the specific notches in a key. Only when those match, that's when the lock is going to open.
Yes.
Similarly, when only that remedy matches with all the symptoms thrown by the patient, that's the only time that the case will open to you and case will lead towards cure.
Wow. What is one common misconception people have about homeopathy that you wish more people just understood?
Homeopathy is slow. That's one of the biggest misconceptions that we generally come across. And that's the reason also people, when it comes to acute conditions, they say, no, homeopathy is slow, so it wouldn't act. But when it comes to acute conditions, if we are on the right remedy, if we are on the right drug, it is instantaneous. The moment the medication touches the tongue, it should start showing results, unless the medicine selected is totally wrong.
But you're examining the emotions, so you want to get to know the patient first. So wouldn't that take time for the person to actually...
It's a good question. So whenever we treat humans, whenever we treat personalities, we generally divide sickness into two kinds, majorly, acute and chronic. Acute is something that is very short. Okay, so in such conditions, whatever you see presenting before you is what we consider for the prescription. But when it is something that is chronic, long-standing ailments and all, where we go into long-time detail consultation, long hours of consulting, and then we make a prescription based on those symptoms. But if it is something that's very acute, we just see what is presenting before us and make a prescription based on that. So those prescriptions are very short, and such drugs are selected which act very fast in such conditions.
So you've come from a family that has been deep-rooted into homeopathy for generations. So did that make your choice of becoming a homeopathic practitioner easier or more difficult?
That was the only thing that I had. Because when we started off, our initial conversations about moms and dads' practice were always over the dinner table. That's where we got acquainted with their cases, and information was passed. This remedy cured this kind of a patient. All that happened quite early in my life.
Was there a specific moment in your life that just clicked and that, this is the right job for me?
Once you enter the profession, every case that gets cured, every chronic case, every difficult case that gets cured always says that you are on the right path. And that's the profession that you are.
But I think naturally in medical school, you are going to go through periods of self-doubt. So was there a moment where you were reassured, this is the profession for me?
This was a case when I just passed out my undergraduation, and we were just in the first year of post-graduation. And we were called up to see a case in Nipani. So at that time I was studying in Belgaum. So we were called up in the evening. A colleague of mine, his nephew was sick. The child, it was an infant just born. And as soon as he was born, that was a difficult labor and he went into convulsions. So that particular evening, since my colleague wasn't in town, so he said, could you go and see the patient in Nipani? So we remember taking our bikes and moving towards Nipani and checking out the small infant who was in the incubator at that particular time, with continuous convulsions throughout that were happening. And the pediatrician at that particular time wanted to start with anticonvulsants, but we said we wouldn't want to start with anticonvulsants. Let's start with homeopathy. He was extremely reluctant for us to start with homeopathy, but then he said it was your wish to start with, so you could start off with. The first day went by. We didn't see much of a change in the patient. We gave the first dose that we required. And after 6 hours, we were not happy with what we were saying. So much so that the pediatrician removed the patient infant from the incubator and said there were other patients he had to look after, and he placed the infant on the bed and said that's all that we could do. At that particular time, since we saw all his reflexes diminishing, that's when we made another prescription, and this time we didn't even put the medicine in the mouth of the infant. We just took a piece of cotton, dipped it in the homeopathic medication, and we rubbed it on the palm. And it was so amazing to see within maybe 30 seconds, a lifeless infant that was there who just started. He just came back to life with one particular jerk. We knew we were on the right remedy. We never made a change after that. Neither did we repeat the remedy back again after that. So that was one thing that really stayed back to me for something that the cure, the power of just a single homeopathic remedy that remained forever.
Looking back now in your journey, what would be the thing that surprised you the most?
That a single homeopathic remedy that's sweet, that's so simple to be taken, could make such a difference, could maybe bring out cures in something that is some kind of disease that you might term as totally incurable, totally chronic, that such simple medication could bring about such a reversal of symptoms is something that's really amazing.
What is something about this career that is heavily romanticized but is completely different?
I would say that like every system, every profession, every system, everything looks good on the outside. Something that you call the swan effect. A swan glides through water, very simple, and it looks beautiful and magnificent. But the amount of hard work that goes beneath the surface of water is something that counts. That's something that nobody can see it. The amount of hard work you do in darkness is the one that really gives you the results.
Okay, so let's address the elephant in the room. Do you get time for hobbies or things that you like being a doctor?
In life, you've got to make choices. When you have a goal, you've got to know the things you've got to reach to fulfill that goal. Once you do those, so whenever you have a goal, you have certain steps, certain things. For example, in my case, I know certain things that have to be done during the day. Okay. Once I finish that, then maybe I can do whatever I want in the rest of the day.
So you get time.
But you got to get up the next day and you got to be back with what you got to do. So there are certain things maybe I would maybe curtail from, or maybe there are certain choices that I made. Maybe my nights, for example, my nights start early. My day starts as well very early. So maybe I wouldn't be a party person, but there are choices that I need to make so that I see that I fulfill all the things that I need to do for the day, so that you reach your targets, you reach your goals, you reach your destination overall. Once in a while, yes, definitely you've got to take time for all your rest of the things that you enjoy doing.
For someone considering homeopathy today, what are some subjects or interests that they should have and that they should be good at to even be considered, like, to go into it?
As I said, every profession requires to be disciplined in it. Whatever it is, there are no freebies in life. Nothing comes easy. Though people might think it's easy, but every profession requires you to have the dedication, to put in that hard work, to put in things so that you keep developing. When I was growing up, my father often told me, like, work hard. And I never realized what was working hard. I thought just going to the clinic, sit in the clinic, and that would be working hard. You put in 8 hours of work and that was working hard. But that doesn't count. Hard work and is what you put once you close your clinic, once you go back, once you go to your study table, once you start studying and learning. That's what hard work is. And that's with every profession. You've got to be disciplined. You've got to be putting in those hours of burning the midnight oil or burning the hours so that you develop. And that's common with every profession, I guess. The more you put in, the more you work hard, the better you get.
As you mentioned studying, so what subjects would someone have to enjoy or prefer to get into this field?
When it comes to homeopathy, something that's very important is observations. You observe. So even when you walk around, you observe people around you, how they behave, how they behave in day-to-day activities, how they behave with their relatives, how they behave. So that's something that's very, very important when it comes to homeopathy, because that speaks and tells you about personalities. And you get similar languages written in our homeopathic materia medica. That's our homeopathic pharmacopoeia. So we generally, many a times, you'll get aggressive patients, how to observe an aggressive patient, how to observe somebody who's in depression, sadness, somebody who's happy-go-lucky. So all those things is something that makes it really very interesting when you're learning about personalities and homeopathy.
So someone who is inclined towards psychology could definitely consider this career.
Yes, definitely.
What does the typical education path look like for a homeopath? How long does it take? And are there any specializations?
Like any medical system, it's 5.5 years of undergraduation, and then it's 3 years for post graduation. In homeopathy, we used to have specializations in post graduation in our own fields of homeopathy. For example, you get something known as materia medica. That's pharmacopoeia in modern medicine, what they say, or repertory. So we specialize in those system of branches of homeopathy. Other than that, of late, there are other specializations that have also come into homeopathy, like skin, pediatrics, things of that also, that are available to specialize or do your post-graduation and in.
So someone who would be interested in surgery, would there be a scope for those people?
Surgery? No. When it comes to surgery, we do not have a special specialization in surgery. If you can cure something without surgery, then why do you require surgery? If something that is caused due to an imbalance in the system, okay, which leads to physical complaints, requires a similar process of cure. Surgery would come if it is, for example, an accident. For example, an accident where the cause of the disease is external. Okay.
Yes.
In such conditions, our limitations also are limited.
Yes. So from a practical perspective, how does the job market of a homeopath look like?
It's very promising. The sky is the limit. Growing up, being in a homeopathy college, growing up, whenever we saw professors and all, we saw the profession would not pay you back as much as we expected to be. I also remember having a patient of coming up to us and saying that she would never get her daughter married to a homeopath because they do not make money. But those are limits what was in the past. Now, when you put in so much of time in consultation, the profession gives you much, much bigger than what is expected. And you see around, I know so many of my colleagues and all who have been paid, if homeopathy has paid them in a lot in return as compared to what they might have thought would have given them when they started off their profession.
So is the scope of homeopathy limited to India, or is it becoming global?
It's a global science. It's basically a science that was founded in Germany. And that's when it came to India years back. But it is a science that's been a lot of people around the world are accepting it, and a lot of people are looking forward for more natural ways of healing. Is what people are looking out for, safer and natural ways. So, and a lot of people consult over the phone, over the net. So with modern technology, with the internet, your doctor is just a click away from anywhere in the world. So it becomes very simple for people to consult as well from other places. So it's equally spread in other parts of the world as well.
So how long would it take you to become financially stable after your education?
Medicine profession is something that takes you years, I guess, to be financially stable. It depends with experience. You usually start small, but then with experience, with the results, with the confidence as you build up, then you can set any limit of your consultation fees, whatever you want as a limit. It doesn't matter which system of medicine you are, as long as the patient benefits from it, and as long as the patient feels the benefits of it, patients are willing to pay you what you ask for.
What was the hardest part about medical school?
The hardest part, remembering what you learn. For example, in homeopathy, you've got 5,000 plus remedies, and in that you'll have 2,000 plus symptoms of each remedy. Remembering all that is something that's extremely cumbersome. So that's where I say discipline comes in, where you need to keep reading, keep learning, keep brushing up. Is something that is a continuous process that you require to do it.
And for someone who is interested in homeopathy, how would they go about it? Would they have to answer NEET or?
Yeah, now it's a common entrance that everybody has to go through.
Yes.
So the same. So it just goes through NEET back again. It's a common entrance that you have to.
Okay. What does a normal day in your clinic look like?
My normal life, okay, so it would be for me, my normal day would be something like wake up at 3, go through my books for an hour, go for a walk or go for a jog.
Every day?
Yes. Go for a walk, go for a gym, maybe for around 2 hours, come back, get ready to work, start work by around 9 o'clock, finish work by around 6, a short little walk, evening walk, and early to bed by, I'll say 9 would be the max.
And would everyone have to kind of be like that, or?
No, it's that's why I say it's your priorities in life. What do you want? Okay. When you set certain principles and certain priorities in your life, everybody around you comes into support. Having a supporting partner also plays a huge role in life. Okay. So when you each one supports each other, then that's what builds successful people like us. People, you just don't look about the superficial as you as an individual, but the people who are around you also contribute a lot towards it.
But like, since you wake up at 3 in the morning, and like, do you get time for your family? Like, would you have preferred to have more time?
Happiness comes in fulfilling the things that you've set during the day. Okay, it's not about motivation, because the time comes when motivation doesn't wake you up at 3. It's about discipline that will make you wake up at around 3 and put in the hard work. You take offs, spend, maybe the weekends are off, you spend time, and on those days you maybe just let loose.
No, but do you get time? Like, would you have preferred to have more time for your family? Because as a doctor, you probably.
Yeah, I would have preferred to have to party. I would have preferred to go out for late night dinners. I would have preferred to do so many things. But then you should know where the limit lies. Where you say, okay, this is how much you can do for the day, because the next day it's back to the same cycle. So if you have late nights, you're not going to sleep well. You're not going to get up at 3. So you got to set those things in prior before as to what do you want to do.
So in homeopathy, the patients, they share their emotional aspects of their life, and sometimes that can be heavy. So how do you deal with it? How do you cope with all that emotional stress?
It's extremely right when it comes to the first thing about the patient. Whatever the patient speaks to us is extremely confidential. We do not share it with anybody or any person other than me. Sometimes you come across some extremely disturbing stories that you hear about patients' life or incidences that have occurred to them. It's just about listening to it, giving it a very good listening ear, because in practice, there is what helps patients a lot is when patients feel that they've been cared for. Maybe just sit and listen to their stories is something that helps patients in recovery also quite a lot. When you just listen to it, you just suck in and forget about it. You cannot be too emotional as well with what patients tells you. It shouldn't affect the doctor in the end. It shouldn't be something that. So it would be if there's something, you just maybe for a few hours think about over it and how you can help the patient. And with so much to do during the day, it might just come for some time and that's it.
So you would listen to them and then you would sit with it for some time and then you would move on.
Yes.
Is that okay?
You can't be emotional. If you get engrossed and get emotionally involved about what has happened to the patient, sometimes you might not make the right decision, the right prescription sometimes may not be possible. There are also cases that come to us where you also got to analyze whether the patient saying it is right or the patient is just exaggerating certain things, certain body language, or maybe checking it out with the bystanders or somebody who's come with the patient also sometimes helps us understand whether what the patient is telling is something that's genuinely true or not. So in such conditions, you listen to it. Do not be too emotional related regarding it. Gives the enough of care to the patient. Be sympathetic towards the patient. Compassionate to the patient is something that would be the major thing that we look out in such conditions.
What are the most common cases that come to you?
A lot of pediatric cases where parents would like to improve their child's immune system, skin-related conditions, gastric-related conditions, and autoimmune conditions is something that something that's more chronic. You wouldn't in a homeopathic clinic, you would seldom get somebody walking into your clinic and coming for a consultation. It would be something that's more chronic, long-standing
Okay.
conditions that generally people look out for in homeopathy.
So, how would you say, how financially stable is this career compared to the other medical fields?
Lesser than the other medical fields for sure. I would definitely say it's sure because for other medical fields, there are other systems of, for example, you have hospitalization or you have a lot of government jobs. But when it comes to homeopathy, it is mostly it's consultation. It's mostly your own clinic, your consultation is the only source of income that you have got.
Okay.
So you've got to base your practice around your clinical consultation is what you look up for.
So, there's no government support.
You get it. There is government support, but it is much less than what we expect it to be.
Okay.
For example, you've got the Ayush ministry that looks after homeopathy and Ayurveda, but it's mostly Ayurvedic centric focus that they have. It's less about homeopathy, is what we generally see.
Are there any major private clinics or firms of homeopathy?
You mean to say branches? Yes, you get a lot. For example, you have heard of Batras. Batras is a chain of homeopathic clinics. You also get specialized homeopathic hospitals as well. Very few in number, but yes, there are around 4-5 big hospitals within the country as well. That's something started off by some really good homeopathic physicians who have started off with homeopathic hospitals as well.
But is that unique to India or is it global?
I do not know globally if there are. But in India, I know there are a few.
Okay.
There wouldn't be, some years back, you wouldn't get maybe an individual homeopathic doctor coming up with a fully homeopathic hospital only that's run on homeopathic medication and patients looking up towards homeopathy for cures.
Okay.
But that's something that's new but it's been going on maybe for a few years now.
So homeopathy has a whole different pharmacology. So all we see are white pills. What do they actually have and contain?
So the white pills, what we call is a vehicle. Okay, the globules is a vehicle. Based on the history of the patient, we select a medication. Okay, which generally comes in liquid forms, which then we use to medicate the pills. Okay, so that's why we call it as a vehicle because it takes the medicine into the organism. So that's why we say it's a vehicle. So a lot of times patients ask us, Doctor Sahab, sab mita goli hai, all look the same. They all look the same, but the medication, we medicate the pills with differs from individual to individual.
Okay, so what was college life fun? Because whatever we see on the internet and all, it's all ratta and college fests and what was your college life like?
College life was the best time of your life, you professionally, educationally, as well as time spent with friends as well. Being in hostel, it's a whole new experience. I often keep telling parents that in case you want your child to develop, to become street smart, you got to send your kids out of homes. They got to stay in your hostels where they learn about life, they learn about experiences, they meet different people. And that's what remains with them for the rest of their life. The confidence of being alone, things of that which really helps the child really develop overall is something that I always say that send them to hostel, let them see what life is in a hostel.
But
I had a lot of fun in my college days.
did you have parties and
Like I guess it's common with every growing up teenager. The parties were part of us. It was real fun.
What subjects would someone have to be interested in if they would want to get into this profession?
You mean to say what subjects do we learn on the...
Yes.
It's the same subjects that you have in any medical system of any medical science. So we have physiology, we will have anatomy, you'll have biochemistry. The only thing that we differ is, in addition to these common subjects that we have, is additional subjects which are related to, specifically related to homeopathy. So it would be something like how you have in modern medicine, you would have their pharmacopoeia. We would have our own pharmacopoeia and subjects related to that, something that we call as materia medica, where we study our drugs. We would have something else which teaches us the philosophy of homeopathy. So we'll have philosophy as a separate subject.
Okay.
So in addition to the main subjects that you have, like surgery, ENT, anatomy, physiology, FMT, PSM, you'll also have, in addition to that, extra subjects that are related, specifically related to homeopathy, that we will have.
So could you say that you had to study more than what?
Extra subjects and rest.
Did you ever experience losing empathy just because like you're listening to stories and like you can't give your 100% energy to every person? Did you ever feel like you were losing your empathy?
No, each individual is different. Each story is different. Each case is totally different. When a homeopathic consultation is something like, I always say, is something like investigating officer, crime branch, where you're trying to observe the patient, trying to listen to what the patient is saying, and along the way pick up interesting points that will help you to understand the patient and make a prescription based on that. Okay, so even though the patient is telling you a story, okay, it is the major important things, the what you need to pick up along the way, which will help in understanding the patient. So it's something that's very, very interesting. It's something that you're always on the watch out for, getting points that will help you in your prescription.
But like as you mentioned earlier that when sometimes they exaggerate what they're actually going through, then how do you tell? And in that, do you make mistakes?
I remember a long time back, when we were treating a cancer patient, the patient came in. He came in with his file here, a whole history, a whole medical file of his, and he just threw it on my table and he said, "Treat me."
Oh.
And then when we were going through, he said he was somebody who was very, very mild and very. For me, it wasn't that. Okay, somebody coming and just tells you something a lot about the egoistic point of view of the patient. There are patients who, especially parents, when they come with kids and they say, when we ask them, "How's your kid?" They'll say, "No, my child is very well behaved, very quiet and very nice and all." But then you're observing the child is all over the place, throwing books around, throwing this. So you know that's not what the child is. So you got to observe that. And that comes with experience, where you observe and you can see as to what it is. A patient is telling something to you, and then maybe the wife just looks back, or things like that, which you need to be in the moment. You need to catch those impulses that happen right there. Maybe a change in a facial expression or something, which you need to say, "Oh, something is out. Something is maybe not wrong with it."
Do the cases sometimes feel monotonous because, you usually get more chronic illnesses, which are usually the same, like stomach aches or skin problems?
For example, in homeopathy, a simple example, eczema. Okay, when it comes to homeopathy, we know eczema has certain symptoms, and medicine has put on people coming with certain symptoms you call as eczema. But in homeopathy, you do not only treat eczema, but you also got to treat the person suffering from eczema. So for us, each person, each case is different. If you look up to homeopathic literature, homeopathic pharmacopoeia, there could be around 500 remedies which could be given in cases of eczema. From those 500 to come down to one single remedy, which would be the most appropriate for the patient, is a skill, and it requires study of the patient as to why somebody might have itching that's more in the night, somebody might have itching that's more in the morning, somebody might have itching that's better by hot application, somebody might have itching that's better by cold application. So we've got to differentiate as to how you can remove the 499 medicines from the one that's exactly suited to the patient. So that requires a lot of study. It requires a lot of observations from our part, and that's how we come to the conclusion as.
So because each case is different, it never feels mundane?
No, it never. Each case or each disease, as we term it, will have a lot of other things, other symptoms that accompany that particular disease name, which differentiates it from the other patients that we see. So sometimes patients come to us and they feel that every case of eczema, for example, receive the same medicine. In homeopathy, it's not like that. I might have 10 cases on a daily basis that we see of eczema, and all 10 might receive extremely different medications. Because in homeopathy, we're just trying to stimulate the individual be in front of us. And the healing has to be accomplished by his own system that has to heal him.
So the body heals itself and the medicine just. While being in medical school and learning all these diseases, did you ever feel like a hypochondriac or, relating to such symptoms of diseases?
No, not related to the disease, but as I said in Materia Medica, when you study the homeopathic pharmacopoeia, you get a lot of symptoms related to the mind, a lot of things that are then you say, oh, am I this remedy? Am I this remedy? So things like that do happen.
Looking back now, what part of your journey surprised you the most?
Something that really surprised me in medical practice is initially when I started my practice, every condition, every ill, I thought of giving a pill. For example, every acute condition, for example, every fever, every cold, every cough, I thought I had to medicate it. But a bit as time passed by, I realized that each individual is born with a inner healing mechanism. For example, a simple example like fever. Why does fever occur? Fever is just a mechanism of the body of killing the germs. Okay, so over a period of time, I've tried to understand as to how is the body responding. For example, if you've got a runny nose, an acute runny nose is just a way by which the body is trying to secrete mucus and throw it out so that the organism, the virus, is just flushed out of the body. Similar with loose motions. So many of these conditions actually are ways by which the body is trying to throw out infectious agents. Is something that really surprised me. I remember a case that had come to me, but this was a chronic case of a nun who had come to me many years back. She came to me with eczema, but it was weeping eczema. So she had a patch on her hand and it was just dripping. It was dripping so much so that she came in with a handkerchief and she was putting a handkerchief so that it could absorb a lot of the discharge that was happening. We finished 1 hour of consultation, and this was there for almost around 10 to 15 years. I do not remember the duration. We finished 1 hour of consultation with her. We went to a deep understanding of what she was, but I wasn't sure of what the remedy was. So I gave her something that was very, very mild, and I said, you come back after 7 days before I make the actual prescription for you. Surprising, after 7 days, she came back without a single drop on her skin. She just came back totally cured. Why it happened, I can speak about philosophically because it is something that triggered healing. Many a times healing, we always look like towards pills to cure healing. But it could just be a conversation. It could just be people opening up the blocks. Okay, or what's opening up something that's the inner healing powers which just open up. It could be different ways by which it could, sometimes you go to spiritual leaders and they call it as miracle, but it could be just inner healing that is maybe a blessing or something of that. They've just kind of given it that extra energy which has just removed those blocks that was suppressing her from healing. Sometimes people go through extremely emotional disturbances and they can never share it with others. Speaking to somebody who's you really can confide with, maybe there are cases that have not opened up certain things in their life. They haven't opened up to people ever in their lives. They'll come and say, this is the first person that have spoken something about this incident to you and nobody else knows. It's me and it's you who know. So these are things that maybe can just open up these internal blocks that are kind of stopping healing from taking place. And this is something that I've learned in practice sometimes. Sometimes when people really open up a lot, I would maybe even wait maybe for a week or so without even making a prescription to them. It's something that's really surprising of this healing power that we have within us.
So would you say you have a better relationship with your patients than conventional medicine doctors?
Definitely. Sometimes a lot of people would go to conventional medicine doctors. The doctor would not even look at the patient. He's directly making the first prescription that happens. But it doesn't happen with all. But there are sometimes when it comes to homeopathy, it's a totally different. It's a totally different ball game that you have.
So in conventional medicine, medical interns, they have to go through 24-hour to 36-hour shifts and might even receive harsh treatments from seniors or even patients. Is that something that homeopathy doctors also have to go through, or is it different or specific to them?
In homeopathy, I wouldn't say we go through so much of work during our internship days because the number of patients that visit a homeopathic hospital also are less in amount as compared to conventional medicine hospitals. So we are not overburdened with the workload as I see some of the interns going through. I'm really surprised that after so many hours of work, also they still can put on a smiling face at the end of their work scales. In homeopathy, it's not something I wouldn't say it's something that is so draining on physically to you.
So you could say like the burnout rate is lesser.
It is less.
Yeah.
It is much, much lesser than conventional medicine.
If you had to redo one thing or tell your younger self something in this journey, what would you do?
Work hard fast. So.
But like you already wake up at 3 o'clock.
No, but that's now, maybe a few years. But maybe I would have studied it much earlier in my life. That would be something that I would have really done. And also maybe a lot of students, the most important thing is the amount of time that you spend in your practice is before you basically start your clinic. So it's always, even though you finish a professional career, whatever career it might be, whatever professional career it might be, you need to spend some amount of time after you finish your education where you sit down with a doctor or the experts in your profession, where you spend some time so that you understand practically as to the different kind of cases that there's different difficulties every profession goes through. And that's very, very important, especially in circumstances like today. Because I know people coming in maybe just for experience, maybe just be with you for a month or so and then leave you. And it's happening, and we see it in every profession, where they stay with you for a short period of time, they think they're experts and they'll start with their own business. But the amount of time that you spend in those, before we used to spend maybe a year with a doctor, where you learn with him. And these are those additional experiences those seniors doctors has to give us. So you need to spend some amount of time where you start learning with practically as to what you see on the ground. Because what you learn in education is totally different from what you practically you gain experience. And being with such experienced doctors, you would have maybe learned it 10 years down the line, but you're cutting it short with just 1 year of being under them, where you're learning something that's totally different in that.
So you would have wanted to shadow more doctors?
Definitely.
Yes.
The more you shadow them, the better you get. Definitely. I would have loved doing that.
For the people who are on the fence of choosing homeopathy or even healthcare, what is one piece of advice you would give them?
Whatever they intend to do, okay? Whether it's medicine or whether it's any other field, you've got to be extremely dedicated to your field. Without dedication, do not expect miracles in your life. You've got to put in the hard work. And you see it, even you see it in sports, for example. Even Sachin Tendulkar, the god of cricket, was practicing till his last day of retirement. Okay, he could say it's the last day. I do not need to practice. But that's what builds leaders. That's what builds people who extremely manage to reach heights in their profession, is through sheer dedication and hard work. It's not easy. It requires sacrifices. Life requires sacrifices. Your profession requires sacrifices, and the time that you put in.
Yes.
And it gives you the dividend. The more you put in, the better you'll reap.
So would you say someone who is not obsessed with medicine but wants to get into helping people, that this profession may not be for them?
In whatever profession you're helping some way or another, some way or another. Okay, you've got to decide what is something that you like doing in life. Whatever. Some people are born with extremely good talents that they would like to pursue. Today, profession is not what we were some years back, where you just said people would just maybe look into the medical field or look into engineering. Very MBA, very few professions to choose from. But as people have progressed, there are different sets of professions that have just opened up for people, where they could make choices much earlier in life. There are so many super specialty professions that people can look into nowadays.
Yes.
And I think that's something that's very, very interesting.
So since you deal with the psychological aspects of the patient as well, do you have cases of medical malpractice? Because in conventional medicine, it's easy to pinpoint it. The drug caused this side effect, shouldn't have been given. Is that also something in homeopathy?
In homeopathy, it's based on 7 cardinal principles. And one of the cardinal principles is minimum dose.
Okay.
That's something that homeopathy strictly abides by it. So when it comes to minimum dose, generally we do not over-medicate patients.
Yes.
We only stimulate patients. You stimulate patients and then the body heals in its second reaction.
Yes.
So that's why you wouldn't get adverse side effects because one thing, it's extremely minimum dose
Yes.
and extremely mild doses that we give in homeopathy.
So the cases are basically very less, non-existent of malpractice.
If you stick to the principles, of homeopathy, you shouldn't be getting any side effects related to it.
Yes. As we come to the end of this podcast, I would like to ask you one final question. What are you still becoming?
A better version of myself that would be on all the aspects. A better person, a better doctor, a better in my profession, in my knowledge, physically better. So it's every aspect of each one's lives. I aspire to get better in each day as it goes.
Thank you for being part of the Becoming Project. It was genuinely an honor to have you.
Thank you so much. Thanks for having us over.
What I'm walking away with today is that medicine isn't just one thing. It's entire waves of thinking about how the body works, of how the mind works. And most of us haven't even been introduced to it. And I do think it's worth knowing before you choose a career. This is to let you know that you are not behind. And I hope that this gave you a little courage to chase something that feels uncertain. You've got this. This is me, Naina, signing out. This is the Becoming Project, and I'm still becoming.